Hello all and welcome to our video on chronic adaptions. Chronic adaptions is our next unit of study and it follows on from your completion or as you're completing your training program and hopefully helps to make sense of why we're doing the training program in the first place. At this time of year you should be well involved into your training program, and you should be hopefully starting to see some changes in your performance, some improvements in your performance would be fantastic. And when we do our post-testing at the end of the block, we should hopefully see an improvement in performance. But what we need to understand through chronic adaptions is, well, what is it that's causing these improvements? What's changing within our body to allow us to improve our performance? So we're going to look at chronic adaptions to the cardiovascular system as a result of aerobic training. So this will really suit those of you who are doing the 3,000 metre as your event. Now, chronic adaptions are different to acute responses, which we studied earlier in the year. Acute responses really only involve the training session itself or whenever you're active. It's the changes that the body makes to get itself through the activity session. If the intensity is high, heart rate will increase. If the intensity is low, heart rate will be low. If the intensity is high, respiratory rate will increase. If the intensity is low, respiratory rate will decrease. And so that obviously changes depending on those particular factors. Chronic adaptions, though, are quite different. Chronic adaptions are adaptions that are made to the physiology of the body. So they are changes that are not permanent, but they're changes that the body has made to try and make the next training session easier. And so if we have a look at this list here, this is what we're going to look at in regards to the cardiovascular system's chronic adaptions to aerobic training. We can see here we've got it broken up into three groups. Changes that affect the heart, changes that affect the blood vessels, and changes that affect the blood itself. And all of these changes are designed to make the next training session easier. It makes your body more efficient. So it should see what was previously hard become easier and easier and easier, which means that to then make it feel harder, you have to actually go faster or further than what you did before, thus getting an improvement in performance. But our first one here is left ventricle size. Really, it's really obvious. What happens is our left ventricle, the part of the heart which is responsible for pumping blood into the aorta, which then feeds blood to the rest of the body, other than the lungs, including the heart, it gets bigger. All right, the muscle tissue that surrounds the left ventricle actually gets thicker and is able to contract with more force. The cavity that fills with blood each beat actually gets bigger so it can hold more blood. So if you can squeeze harder, well then you can make sure you get all the blood or more of the blood that's in that cavity, you can squeeze it out. It's like the difference between softly squeezing a sponge or really squeezing a sponge really firmly. You're going to obviously get more water out of that firm squeeze of the sponge, and it's the same with our heart. If we can squeeze down harder, we're going to get more blood out per beat, which is going to increase our stroke volume. Increasing your stroke volume is a fantastic advantage because, as we know, or as we should know, we can't really do much about our heart rate. Our maximum heart rate is our maximum heart rate. It doesn't change as a result of training. All right, the intensity or the speed that we're going at will certainly change as a result of training, but your maximum heart rate is pretty much locked in, as we've discussed in that formula, of 220 minus your age. So for me at 34 years of age, my maximum heart rate's going to be 186 beats per minute. For most of you being 17 or 18 years of age, your maximum heart rate's going to be 202 beats per minute. All right, so that's not going to change as a result of training. But what can change is your stroke volume, which is going to allow your cardiac output to increase. So, if we have a look here, sorry, wrong slide. If we have a look here at this little graph, we've got our athlete in two stages. The red stage is after their training, so maybe you guys after your 6-week training block. The blue line represents an athlete pre-training, so you guys before your 6-week training block. You can see here that our athlete has a stroke volume at pre-training levels of 70 mils per beat. Here they have a stroke volume of about 80 mils per beat, I guess we'd say. We can see here as the speed on the treadmill increases, we get an increase in stroke volume. So it rises for the trained athlete from about 80 mils per beat to probably somewhere in the vicinity of 150 mils per beat. For our untrained athlete or pre-training athlete, it rises from 50 to maybe somewhere around 115, 110, something like that. Now, hopefully, there are students in the group who are looking at this graph and going, well, it doesn't quite fit, doesn't quite sit well. And I would agree with you, because we discussed earlier in the year with acute responses with stroke volume that we get no more increase in stroke volume after about 40% of maximum heart rate. And I tell you what, if there's anyone running around on a treadmill at 40% maximum heart rate at 15 k's an hour, they are doing very, very, very well. So remember that at about 30 to 40% of maximum heart rate, we get a plateauing, that is a flat spot, or no more further rise in our stroke volume. And that's because simply the time between heartbeats is insufficient to fill the heart with any more blood. And so any increases in cardiac output after about 40% of maximum heart rate are all due to increases in heart rate. So if we have a look here at this little table, you can see here we've got our two athletes. The trained athlete, 80 mils. Untrained athlete, 70 mils. They're both operating at a level of rest. So on average, when we're resting, we need to get about 5 litres of blood around our body per minute. So I've put the cardiac output in there as 5 litres or 5,000 millilitres. You can see straight away that there's a difference in their heart rates to achieve that number of 5,000. Our trained athlete has a heart rate of 62.5 or a resting heart rate of 62.5. Our untrained athlete has a resting heart rate of 71.4. So that's why resting heart rate can actually be a good measure of fitness, because it gives an indication as to an athlete's stroke volume. The lower your resting heart rate, well then clearly the higher your stroke volume must be. So for example here, I'll put in an example for you, which most of my class will understand the humour in this, but really simply, for an athlete like myself, stroke volume maybe of 120, resting heart rate down there at 41.67, a shade under 42 beats per minute. Now, some athletes, famous athletes like Kieran Perkins and Lance Armstrong, obviously, who knows what they've done to achieve these numbers, but they reportedly at the peak of their powers had resting heart rates less than 30 beats per minute. So obviously that's a huge, huge difference to a normal person, which is going to get played out enormously at this end when we take their heart rate to maximal levels. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. If we have a look at that diagram, when we talked about the trained athlete, their stroke volume rose to about 150. Alrighty. So all of a sudden, if they're doing that, our untrained athlete, they can rise theirs to 110. All right, so we've got that going there. We change this here to 200 for both of them. Let's say they're going at max heart rates. Alrighty, let me just quickly put in the sum here. We've got, what have we got? B3 multiplied by C3. You can see here that this athlete's able to circulate 30 litres of blood around their body, where our other athlete, even though they're going at the same heart rate, can only circulate 22,000 litres of blood. Sorry, 22,000 millilitres of blood, 22 litres of blood. So that's a huge difference. We're talking almost a difference there of 7/10 the level of performance. So that means that athlete here, the untrained athlete, is going to have to go beyond their lactate inflection point at a much lower speed than what this athlete is. This athlete's going to be able to create more energy using their aerobic system for much longer than this athlete. So it's going to be a tremendous advantage for them. All right, keeping on going. We've got rest and sub-max heart rates. So again, we've just got a little table, a little graph here, which hopefully makes sense to us. All right, we can see here that our untrained athlete has a higher resting heart rate, has to go to higher heart rate levels to deal with the intensity of exercise, and then takes longer to get back to their resting levels or near their resting levels down here. Our trained athlete has a lower resting heart rate, doesn't have their heart rate rise as high because they find that level of exercise easier. That's because they have a bigger stroke volume. They're able to pump the same amount of blood around their body for less beats, because each beat actually pushes out more blood. All right? And that sort of gives them something in reserve, because when they go to maximum heart rate, as we demonstrated here, they're going to be able to pump much more blood around their body, which means they're pumping more oxygen around their body, which means they're removing more carbon dioxide and any lactate and metabolic byproducts that are being produced as a result of exercise. Hopefully that makes sense to you all. I need to hurry. All right, recovery heart rates, they'll also recover quicker. All right, so we'll get back to resting levels far faster if we have done some training, some aerobic training. Alrighty, we move on to blood vessels. As we improve, one of the keys to our improvement is we actually get a development of more blood vessels going to where blood is needed. So in the situation of the body, we're looking at two key areas. We're looking at the heart itself, being able to feed the heart, the actual heart muscle, so not the blood that's in the atriums or the ventricles, but the blood that's come out of the left ventricle, gone into the aorta, and almost straight away then flowed into the carotid artery, which actually feeds the tissues of the heart. And so that heart is contracting really, really fast when we're exercising, so it needs energy as well to maintain that contraction speed. So by being able to feed blood to the heart means it's going to be able to operate more efficiently. What we also see is we get a better redistribution of blood flow. An athlete who has done lots of aerobic training will actually get better at sending blood to working muscles and also sending blood to the skin as well. So it's able to take away blood from non-essential areas. Non-essential areas are going to include organs that aren't essential to physical activity, things like your digestive system and those areas of the body, and actually send the blood that would normally be going there, send that to the heart, send that to the working muscles, send that to the skin so we can cool ourselves down more effectively. Also, the body becomes so efficient that it stops sending blood to certain muscle types. And so it's going to stop sending as much blood to type 2B muscle fibers. Remember, type 2B muscle fibers are our power fibers, they're our ATP, CP fibers. When we're in endurance events, we're not using those fibers really at all. So there's no point sending blood there. So we're going to restrict our blood flow to those areas of the muscles and make sure they're going to our type 1 muscle fibers, all right, which are our aerobic energy system muscle fibers. All right. Also what we have is we have a greater capillary density at the muscles. I haven't lost my magic pen. I'm back in the game. All right. So if we have a look here, here's a really, really simple way I like to think of how this all works. Where's my pen? Rightio. So, if we've got blood coming into the muscles, obviously the more blood that comes in, hopefully you understand that the better it's going to be, the quicker we're going to be able to provide the muscle tissue with oxygen, and the quicker we're going to be able to remove whatever waste products are created during that exercise. So, in case you don't understand what this means, let's imagine we've got the MCG. Not a great drawing, but that doesn't matter. Imagine how long it would take to fill the MCG if there was only one way of getting in. We only had one turnstile. It's going to take forever for people to get in there, the 100,000 people that sit in the stands. It's going to take them forever to fill this particular ground up. But of course, that's not the situation, is it? All right. What we have is we have numerous entrances. We have gates. I think there's about 9 gates around the G. I'm making that up, but who knows? All right. And that allows for the ground to fill up so much more quickly, and also allows for it to empty just as quickly. And that's exactly how it works with our body, all right, with our working muscles. As we do more aerobic training, the body responds and goes, well, hang on, what we could do to make this next training session easier is we could get more capillaries growing into the muscle tissue to allow us to feed the muscle tissue with oxygen more effectively, and also allow us to get rid of those waste products more effectively, which is going to make the training session next time easier. Alrighty, we continue down our list. We've got an increase in blood volume as well. So what happens is we get increased amounts of plasma, we get increased amounts of red blood cells. All right? The red blood cell concentration, though, does not increase. All right? And this sort of leads us to where professional sports are going, like cycling, with the idea of a blood passport, where what they're looking at is taking blood samples from athletes at the beginning of their career and comparing that blood sample against every performance they do throughout their career. If there's changes in red blood cell concentration that are beyond what they deem normal levels, well, then it can be safely assumed the athlete's taken something to cause that to happen, which would be illegal. And so, although your red blood cell concentration doesn't change, the fact that you've got more red blood cells in volume is obviously going to allow you to carry more oxygen around your body. Remember, it's hemoglobin in the red blood cells that's the important part of that, because it's the hemoglobin that has the oxygen bond to it. We get an increase in the amount of myoglobin, and we also get a decrease in blood pressure. Not really at maximal levels, but certainly a little bit at resting levels and submaximal levels. That said, the biggest amount of blood pressure decrease tends to be for individuals who have high blood pressure. doing some aerobic training will actually see their blood pressure decrease. If you've got normal levels of blood pressure, well, you won't get much of a change. All right. Hopefully those things make sense to us all. If you're in class on Monday, make sure you do questions 1 to 6 out of your booklet. Thanks very much. Ta-da.